Welcome to today's Missionary. This is the first video in a series on missionary discipleship. We're going to be reading the Gospels Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. We'll probably get into some other verses later on, but we're going to start there. We're going to talk about what it is to follow Christ and to be a missionary. Now, I'm going to suggest a few things here. I would suggest that you get these kinds of normal ink pens, and you need to get blue, black, and red. And you also need to get a ruler so that you can underline the verses, a little metal ruler or a plastic ruler. And you can see here that I have underlined some verses in black and in red. I also suggest that you get a Bible version that's easy to read. If you have the means, I suggest you get a Bible where the words of Christ are in red. That's going to help you make the distinction of when Christ is speaking and when he's not. I also suggest that you start to ignore the titles that are above the verses and the chapter numbers because these also can get in the way of what you're trying to read. Verse 18. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him. Most of the time, when we want to be missionaries, we look for courses. We're not really looking for a discipleship. And that's basically what Jesus is telling us as Christians. We need to make disciples. We've kind of disconnected the two. So, discipleship really needs to be personal and with as few people as possible. But nevertheless, this is the best that we can do. And I'm going to look over these verses with you. But our discipleship really comes from God, comes from Christ, and it comes from the Holy Spirit. And I want to teach you some concepts that are going to really help you. These are for people who are going where the gospel has never been preached before. That's an important point we're going to make over time. It's unfortunate that a lot of the mission fields that do not have any workers are cut off from access to Christ. And basically, we need to go. We need to just come and follow Jesus out into the mission fields. That's where he's going, and that's where we're going to go to if we follow him. So let's slow down, take a look at these verses. This is a concept that's very important. Slowing down your life, setting aside time to really begin to look at these verses and allowing them to become deeper in our own hearts. This is a very important thing for missionaries. A lot of people come to a missionary training course and they haven't really read their Bibles very much. So we're going to slow down and take a look at this. They were casting their nets into a lake, for they were fishermen. Jesus comes along and says, "Come, follow me. I'm going to make you fishers of men." The disciples that Jesus called these particular disciples were fishermen. And Jesus is saying, listen, you're doing something with your lives. You're important people. You're important to your community and to your families. But come, I'm going to take you along with me, and I'm going to teach you how to do something different. I'm going to make you fishers of men. They were made fishermen by their fathers. Jesus is going to make them fishers of men. Verse 21, going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. So, underline these verses in red. The one above it, you can underline in black. We're going to go backwards just a few verses so that you can get these others. The black verses are the core of the gospel message and actually what it is we need to be doing as missionaries once we get to these fields that have no workers. And the red verses are what Jesus is actually teaching us to become effective in the field. So there's two things here. One is we're going to have to change what we think and what we want with our lives in order to do what Jesus wants. And the other thing is the immediacy or the response and how we actually do that. Now, we can look at this in the context of, well, this was then and this was for them. We need to begin to look at the New Testament as our missionary training manual, especially the Gospels. And we need to take time to look at those Gospels, and we need to have a certain focus and a certain attitude when we do that, or it's just going to go right over our heads. So we have to begin to look at these things as instructions that Christ is giving us. The disciples took many years to write these things down, and they chose very carefully what they wrote down for us so that we can know what we need to do. The New Testament Gospels were written for people who are going to go, who are already going. That's why most of the time the Gospels are taught in Sunday school to children. We don't really pay much close attention to them. And a lot of the things that Jesus says, they really aren't necessarily for us. Why? Because we're not going. Because we're not taking the gospel of Christ to where it's never been preached before. So the two things are, we are going to have to do something different with our lives, and we need to do it. We need to do it when He is asking us to do it. There was an immediate response. In verse 20, it says at once. And in verse 22, it says immediately. Slow down, read these verses, and take them in, and come back, and we'll see you in the next time.